Just wait in the car, Mum. We'll be right back. It's only 20 minutes. That was what my son said. He said it the way you'd say it to a golden retriever. Calm, firm, with just enough softness to keep the peace. I nodded. Of course I did. I waited 4 hours. It was a Tuesday in October, the kind of day that can't decide if it's fall yet. The parking lot of the Marriott in Scottsdale smelled like sunscreen and sprinkler water. I sat in the back seat of my son's Lexus with a travel magazine I'd already read and a half-empty bottle of water that had gone warm. My carry-on was in the trunk. I was supposed to be inside that hotel too. My name was on the reservation. I'd seen it on the confirmation email. 3 rooms, 7 nights, the Harlow family reunion trip we'd been planning since February. My son had come to my house the week before to help me pack. He'd carried my suitcase to the car himself. His wife stood in my kitchen and said, "This is going to be so good for you, Helen. You need this." She'd said it like she was doing me a favor, like joy was something she was handing me on a plate. At the hotel entrance, before he left me in the car, my son touched my arm. "They're finishing the room setup. Won't be long." He smiled his efficient smile, the one he uses for clients, for waitstaff, for anyone he needs to manage without engaging. Then he and his wife and both of my grandchildren disappeared through the revolving door with their luggage. By noon, the car had grown hot. I cracked the window. By 1, I walked to a bench near the valet stand and sat there instead. By 2, a young man in a hotel vest asked if I needed assistance. I said I was waiting for my family. He nodded and didn't ask again. At 3:15, a woman at the front desk looked up my reservation with careful eyes and told me, gently, the way people tell you things they don't want to be the one to say, that my room had been cancelled 2 weeks ago. Single modification, no refund processed. Someone had called in. I thanked her. I walked back to the bench. I sat down and looked at my hands for a long time. My name is Helen. I'm 68 years old. I spent 31 years teaching 5th grade at Bridgewater Elementary in Columbus, Ohio. I raised one son by myself after my husband Gerald left when our boy was 9. I made it work. I always made it work. That's the thing about being the kind of woman who makes things work. People stop noticing the effort and start assuming it's just the weather. I didn't call my son. I sat on that bench and I thought about what I knew. I knew my room had been cancelled. I knew no one had come back for me. I knew that the conference room on the 2nd floor, where the family setup was supposedly happening, had been booked for a corporate event, not a reunion. The front desk woman had mentioned it without knowing she was telling me anything important. 20 minutes became 4 hours, and in those 4 hours something shifted in me, not broke, not cracked, just shifted, like furniture being quietly moved to another room while you sleep. I had my purse, my phone, my debit card from the account I'd kept in my name only since 1987, the one Gerald never knew about, and my son never thought to ask about. I had $340 in cash because I always travel with cash. Old habit, teacher's habit, habit of a woman who learned early not to count on anyone else's plans. I went back to the front desk. I asked the woman, her name tag said Petra, if there were any rooms available. She looked at me for a moment, then she said, "We have a standard queen on the 4th floor. 2 nights available before we're fully booked." I said I'd take it. I used my own card. I gave myself a different last name at checkout. My maiden name, Whitmore. The name I was born with. Room 412 was small and cool and smelled like laundered cotton. There was a window that looked out over a courtyard with a fountain. I set my purse on the chair, sat on the edge of the bed, and did not cry. My phone had 3 texts from my daughter-in-law. The first said, "We're getting settled, having dinner with the cousins, hope you're comfortable." The second said, Let us know if you need anything. The third, sent 20 minutes later, said nothing, just a sunshine emoji. She thought I was in a room. She thought I'd checked in somehow and tucked myself away. She wasn't worried. She was relieved. That told me everything I needed to know. I ordered room service, a BLT and a cup of tomato soup. I watched the news with the volume low, and I thought about Gerald leaving, about the years after, about the parents of my students who thanked me at graduation and the ones who never did. I thought about all the times I'd said, of course, and no trouble, and I'll manage. I thought about how a person can spend a lifetime making herself small enough to fit into whatever space is left after everyone else has settled in. Then I slept, deeply without interruption, for 9 hours. In the morning, I sat at the little desk with the hotel notepad and made a list. Not an emotional list, a practical one. What I had, what I needed, what I was not willing to do next. At the bottom of the list, I wrote Tucson. I had a college friend there, Marvell. We'd lost touch the way people do, gradually, then suddenly. But I still had her number saved under her full name, the way you do with people you trust completely. I hadn't called her in 4 years. I called her at 8:15 in the morning without rehearsing what I would say. She picked up on the second ring. Helen, just my name, like she'd been expecting it. I need a favor, I said. Where are you? Scottsdale. Tucson's 2 hours south. Are you driving, or do you need me to come? That was Marvell. No fuss, no preamble. 38 years of friendship distilled into a single practical question. I rented a car from the hotel concierge, compact sedan, 2-day minimum. I put it on my card. I packed my bag neatly, the way I packed for school field trips, and I left the hotel at 9:40. I left no note. I turned my phone to silent. The drive to Tucson was quieter than I expected. The desert stretched wide and copper-colored in every direction. I stopped once for gas and a coffee and stood at the pump watching a hawk circle overhead until it disappeared over the ridge. I didn't miss anyone. That surprised me. I thought I would. Marvel lived in a small house on a cul-de-sac in midtown Tucson with terracotta pots on every step and a wind chime made of old keys. She opened the door before I knocked. She looked at my face and stepped aside without asking anything. Her guest room had a woven blanket on the bed and a stack of paperbacks on the nightstand. It smelled like the cedar sachets she'd always used in her closets. I sat on the edge of the bed and said, "They cancelled my hotel room, without telling me." Marvel leaned against the doorframe with her arms crossed. "Did your son do it, or his wife?" "I don't know. Doesn't change much." "No," she said. "It doesn't." She made dinner. Chicken pozole from scratch with hominy and dried chiles she kept in a clay jar on the counter. We ate at her kitchen table with the back door open to the evening air. The neighborhood was quiet except for a dog somewhere down the block and the distant sound of a sprinkler. I told her everything. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she refilled my bowl and said, "So what are you going to do?" "I don't know yet." "That's fine. You can stay here while you figure it out." I stayed 2 weeks, then I stayed another. On the third day, I walked Marvel's neighborhood alone in the early morning and noticed a flyer stapled to a telephone pole near the corner park. Part-time position, weekday mornings, Saguaro Community Library, experience with children or education preferred. I pulled the flyer off the pole and folded it into my pocket. I applied that afternoon using Marvel's address and my teaching credentials from 31 years at Bridgewater. The branch manager, a soft-spoken man named Phil who wore reading glasses on a lanyard, interviewed me in a small office between the periodicals and the audiobooks. He asked one question that mattered. "Do you like being around people even when they're difficult?" I said, "I spent 3 decades in a room with 25 10-year-olds every day. Difficult is just a Tuesday." He hired me for the Tuesday-Saturday morning shift. 9 to 1, $11 an hour plus a small travel reimbursement. I bought a bus pass. I learned the route. Marvel didn't hover. That was the gift of her. She went about her days, her garden, her book club, her volunteer work at the food pantry on Fridays, and she left space beside her without making it feel like charity. Some evenings we cooked together. Some evenings she brought home takeout from the Thai place on Grant, and we watched old films on her couch with a bowl of popcorn between us. There was a companionable silence in that house I hadn't felt in years. Gerald had always filled silence with grievances. My son filled it with plans. Marvel had let it breathe. I turned my phone back on at the end of the first week. 41 notifications, 17 missed calls, 12 from my son, 4 from my daughter-in-law, 1 from a number I didn't recognize, 6 voicemails. I listened to them in order. The first, from my son, the evening of day 1. "Mom, where are you? We knocked on your door and the front desk said you checked out. Call me." The second, the next morning. "Mom, this isn't funny. We're worried. Please call." The third, that afternoon. "I don't know what you're trying to prove, but you need to call me right now." The fourth, a long pause. Then his voice, quieter. "Is this about the room?" "Helen." "We had to make some adjustments. I was going to explain." I stopped there. Adjustments. The word sat in the air of the guest room like a smell you can't place. The fifth was my daughter-in-law, her voice smooth and measured. "Helen, we understand you might be upset, but running off without telling anyone is not the answer. The kids are asking about you. Just let us know you're safe." The sixth was from the unknown number, a young voice. My granddaughter calling from a friend's phone. "Grandma, it's Nora. I don't know what happened, but I know it wasn't right. Please be okay. I love you." I listened to that one 3 times. I didn't call my son. I didn't call my daughter-in-law. I sent Nora a text from the number she'd used. "I'm safe, sweetheart. I love you too." She responded in under a minute with a row of hearts. At the library, I found my rhythm in the first week. Children's reference desk in the mornings. Storytime coordination on Saturdays. There was something grounding about the work. Books don't need management. They don't need to be handled or soothed or strategically positioned. They just are what they are, and children who love them simply, without complication. Phil was easy to work for. He left people alone when they were good at what they did. By the 3rd week, he brought me a spare set of keys and said, "You're usually here before I am. You might as well be able to let yourself in." There was a regular at the library, a woman who came every Tuesday with a canvas bag full of holds and stayed for 2 hours at the reading table near the window. Her name was Cecile. 73, recently widowed, 2 daughters in different states. We started talking the way library people do, quietly, in increments. A comment about a book cover. A shared eye roll at the broken printer. By the 4th week, she was saving the seat across from her when she saw me come in. Cecile didn't ask about my family. She asked about Gerald once, when I mentioned being a single mother, and I told her the short version. She nodded and said, "Mine waited until retirement to fall apart." We didn't need more than that. 6 weeks in, a thick envelope arrived at Marvolet's house, my name on the front in my son's handwriting. The return address was Columbus. Inside, a letter. It was long. 7 pages, single-space, on our family's printer paper. I could tell by the faint teal border he'd never changed the template on. He told me I had caused a family crisis, that his children were confused, that his wife hadn't slept properly since Scottsdale, that my behavior was irresponsible and, frankly, embarrassing. He listed things I had apparently done wrong over the years. forgotten his wife's birthday twice, not come to his firm's holiday party in 2019, been difficult at Thanksgiving the year before last. He did not mention the hotel room. He did not mention 4 hours in a parking lot. He did not mention the voicemail where he said adjustments. He ended with, "We want to resolve this, but we need you to come home first. We can talk once you're back where you belong." Where you belong. I read the letter once. I folded it into thirds. I walked to Marvell's recycling bin and put it there without ceremony. Then I washed my hands at the kitchen sink and made a pot of tea. Marvell came in from the garden with dirt on her gloves. She looked at my face. "Bad?" "Predictable," I said. She pulled off her gloves. "Tea for me too, please." We sat at the table in the afternoon light. I told her what the letter said. She listened. Then she said, "He's never going to admit it, you know." "I know." "Does that change anything for you?" I thought about it. "No, I think that's the point. It doesn't have to." Phil gave me a Saturday in November off when Maville and I drove to Bisbee for the weekend, an old mining town in the hills near the border, full of narrow streets and art galleries and good coffee. We stayed in a bed and breakfast run by a couple who'd moved there from Portland 20 years ago. We ate breakfast on the porch and watched the sun come up over the Mule Mountains. On the drive back, Marvell said, "You look different." "Different how?" "Less compressed, like you've taken up your full amount of space again." I thought about that for a long time. Nora called on a Sunday evening. She was using her own phone now. She said she'd gotten a part-time job at a coffee shop near school and was saving for a trip. She said her father was still angry and that her mother kept saying things about giving Grandma time to come around. She said she didn't think I needed to come around to anything. I asked her how school was. She said good, mostly, that she liked her history teacher and hated geometry and had started reading more. I told her there was a bookstore in Tucson I wanted to show her sometime. She said she'd like that. She asked if she could visit at Christmas. I told her yes, but alone, just the two of us. She was quiet for a moment. Then, "I figured you'd say that. I already told Mom it would just be me." My granddaughter had taken care of it before I'd asked. I didn't say what I felt. I just said, "Good, I'll make the cinnamon rolls." She laughed, easy, warm, uncomplicated, and we stayed on the phone for another hour talking about nothing and everything, the way you can when you're not trying to manage each other. The week before Christmas, a formal letter arrived from a Columbus law office. My son had retained an attorney. The letter stated that my family was concerned about my mental and financial well-being and wished to discuss potential next steps regarding my living situation and assets. It used the word sound judgment twice. It said they were prepared to pursue further options if I did not make contact within 30 days. I read it at the kitchen counter. I set it down. I called the legal aid office at the Pima County Courthouse and asked for a referral to a family law attorney. The woman on the phone gave me 3 names. I called the first one, a woman named Patricia Cross, and left a message. She called back within the hour. I explained the situation. She listened without interruption. "Do you want to respond to the letter?" "Yes. I want them to understand that this is finished." "Then let's write something that makes that clear." We met the following Tuesday at her office on Speedway. She was direct and unhurried and did not treat me like a problem to be solved. She drafted a 2-paragraph response on my behalf. I was of sound mind, in good health, residing at a stable address, and fully capable of managing my own affairs. Any further legal contact would be considered an attempt at coercion. I signed it with a pen that felt heavier than it should have. It went out certified mail on a Wednesday. Nora arrived on the 23rd of December on a Southwest flight from Columbus. She was taller than I remembered, or maybe just more present. She stood in baggage claim in a green coat with her hair pulled back and a book sticking out of her coat pocket, and she hugged me hard and long the way young people do when they mean it, without performance. We drove to a Mexican restaurant I'd been saving for the occasion. We ate tamales and talked for 3 hours. She told me about a boy she liked and a professor she didn't. She told me her father had barely spoken to her since she told him she was coming alone. She told me her mother had cried once in the kitchen when she thought no one was watching. I listened. I didn't offer opinions on her parents. That wasn't mine to do. What I did say was this: whatever happened between me and your dad, that's between us. It doesn't have anything to do with how much I love you. You don't have to carry any of it. She nodded slowly like she was absorbing it. Then she said, I know. I just wanted you to know I see it. What happened, I'm not going to pretend I don't. That was enough, more than enough. We baked on Christmas Eve in Marvolet's kitchen, cinnamon rolls and a pan of walnut brownies for Cecile, who was spending the holiday with her daughter in Phoenix but had asked me to leave something on her porch. Nora was messy with flour and didn't apologize for it. Marvel put on Nat King Cole and danced in her slippers. The windows fogged from the oven heat. Outside, the Tucson night was 50 degrees and clear. On Christmas morning, Nora and I walked to the neighborhood park while the rolls were rising. She wore my old cardigan over her pajamas and carried 2 coffees from the gas station across the street, a habit she'd apparently developed on night shifts at the coffee shop. Bad coffee and all, we sat on a bench and watched the sky go from grey to pink to pale gold. She said, Are you going to stay here? I think so. For now. Is it good? I thought about Phil and the library keys, about Cecile and the reading table, about Marvell dancing in the kitchen, about the view from my window at the bed and breakfast in Bisbee, about what Marvell had said, less compressed, like you've taken up your full amount of space again. It's mine, I said. That's better than good. Nora nodded and wrapped both hands around her terrible coffee. We sat there until the park filled with the sound of children, and neither of us felt the need to fill the silence with anything else. After the holiday, I went back to the bank where I'd opened a local checking account. I asked to make a transfer, a specific amount to a specific account. The teller asked for the routing information. I gave her Nora's. It wasn't a grand sum. It was the kind of money that buys groceries for a month or a plane ticket somewhere you've never been. I added a note in the memo line, which I knew she might never see but wrote anyway, for wherever you need to go when you need to go there. No strings, just a door left open. In January, I got a second set of library keys made, my own, on a ring with a small ceramic charm Cecile gave me for Christmas, a painted bird with its wings spread. I walked to work 3 mornings a week. The other 2 I took the bus and read. I made a habit of arriving early and making the coffee before Phil got in. He had stopped being surprised by this. He just showed up, poured himself a cup, and said good morning like we'd been doing it for years. There were still quiet aches, the kind that settle in around 2 in the morning when the house is still and your mind decides to run its own inventory. I thought sometimes about the parking lot in Scottsdale, the bench by the valet stand, the warm water bottle, and the travel magazine I'd already read. I thought about what it takes for a person to decide, quietly and without announcement, that someone they love is no longer worth collecting. I thought about what it takes to decide they're wrong. One evening, I got out a note card, the kind I used to use for parent notes at Bridgewater, cream-coloured with a small border, and I wrote on it in my own handwriting, You spent a long time making yourself easy to leave. That was never the assignment. You are here. You are whole. You are not the woman in the parking lot anymore. You are the woman with the library keys. I taped it inside my nightstand drawer, where I'd see it when I reached for my reading glasses each morning. My son has not written again. His attorney has not followed up. Whether that is because of Patricia Cross's letter or something else, I don't know. I'm not waiting to find out. Nora texts me on Sunday evenings. Sometimes just a photo, a book she's reading, a coffee she made, a view from her campus window. Sometimes a few words, once just thinking of you. That's the one I kept. That's the one I read when I need to remember what it feels like to matter, simply because you're you, not because of what you produce or provide or quietly absorb. Marvel's wind chime makes a soft sound in the morning when the air moves through the courtyard. The library opens at 9. The coffee is already made when Phil arrives. Cecile saves the reading chair by the window. I am not waiting for anyone to come back for me. I already did that myself. I still think about that parking lot sometimes, not with anger anymore, more the way you think about a scar you've stopped noticing until the light hits it right. 4 hours in a Scottsdale parking lot, a warm water bottle, a magazine I'd already read, and somewhere inside that hotel my family settling in without me. What I've come to understand is that nothing that happened was sudden. It built the way most things build, quietly, over years, in small allowances. Every time I said no trouble at all when there was trouble, every time I absorbed the slight and called it grace, every time I made myself convenient, I taught my family, without meaning to, that I could be set aside and returned to my original shape. I was so good at recovering that they stopped worrying about the impact. That's not a judgment on them. It's an honest look at what I participated in. The cause wasn't one afternoon in Arizona. The cause was a long pattern of making myself the most flexible person in every room. And the effect, being left in a parking lot while my room was cancelled without a word, was just the day that pattern finally showed its face clearly enough that I couldn't look away. What I chose to do next was the only real decision that mattered. I could have called my son and waited for an explanation that would have explained nothing. I could have gone up to that hotel room and spent 7 nights being managed and placated and mildly apologized to over breakfast. I'd done that before in different ways. I knew how it ended. You absorb it. You forgive it. You go home and nothing changes because nothing was ever required to. Instead, I called my valet. I rented a car. I drove south into the desert with the windows down, and every mile felt like something loosening in my chest that I hadn't known was tight. What I found in Tucson wasn't reinvention. That word implies more drama than the truth deserves. What I found was what was already mine. The steadiness I'd carried through 31 years of teaching. The practical intelligence that had kept me and my son afloat after Gerald left. The stubbornness, and I'll call it that honestly, that had always been in me, but that I'd spent too long pointing inward instead of outward. Phil trusted me with the library keys because I showed up and did good work. Cecile became a friend because I was honest without needing anything from her. Nora came to Tucson alone because she had the clarity to see what was real and the courage to act on it. These things happened because I finally stopped making my own worth conditional on other people's comfort. That's what I want to say to anyone watching who recognized something in this story. Not that your family is wrong and you are right. Those lines are rarely that clean. But that the habit of shrinking yourself to fit into space you weren't really offered is a habit, not a destiny. It can be interrupted. It can be set down on a bench outside a hotel valet stand and left there. You don't have to make a scene. You don't have to make anyone understand. You just have to decide, quietly and without announcement, that you are worth the full amount of space you actually take up. And then you have to go find the place where that's already true. Nora's texts come on Sunday evenings now. Sometimes just a photo. Sometimes just thinking of you. That's what real connection feels like. Not managed, not conditional, just present. I'm the woman with the library keys. That took longer than it should have, but I got there.